You know, after watching this entire movie and seeing its visual wonders and splendors and its big arc for the movie, I do have one thing to say coming out of the film. I'm really excited for Loki Season 2. Hello interwebs, I hope you're all doing well, and I'm here to review the latest MCU movie and the official kickoff to Marvel Phase 5, this one, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. And I will stay mostly spoiler-free up front, but I will go into full spoiler talk by the end of this review. And quite frankly, this is probably going to be one of my shorter reviews because despite the fact that this is the official kickoff to Phase 5 of Marvel, there's not much to say about Ant-Man Quantumania, and I'm honestly really disappointed to say that, because, you know, going into the film, I had seen a lot of the discourse and the reviews, and of course this is the second of only 2 Marvel movies that have gotten the Rotten rating, but in a weird way that kind of had me excited, because I have always been a proponent of, I am more a fan of messy movies than I am movies that follow the typical formula. You know, Marvel has been kind of been getting less and less interesting to me over the course of Phase 4 because it's very much been hitting the beats. It's, you know, when you go into a Marvel movie, you kind of know exactly what to expect, and it's not really moving the needle in any kind of intriguing way. There's been some movies that have done that for me, like I think Black Panther 2 kind of did that, and I've liked some of the MCU projects that have been going on with like the TV shows, but overall Marvel has been kind of just spinning in place for the most part over these last few projects. But the last Marvel movie that did really excite me, and I know I'm the weirdo for saying this, was The Eternals. It was not a great movie by any means. I know it had a lot of messy stuff, but for me, I thought it was like interesting that they were trying to do something new. It was like an ensemble movie. It was trying to be something different within the MCU. And a lot of people disliked that movie. It got a rotten score, but I was intrigued by it. I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for The Eternals, and I know I'm weird in that assessment, and I won't relitigate that whole discussion. But because of that, I was kind of hoping going into Ant-Man Quantumania, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, that it was like, oh, this is going to be a movie that would kind of be also messy as well. But actually, coming out of it, I have to say, really, this was just a movie that just hit every single Marvel beat that you expect, and that's about it. And there's nothing special about it. There's no unique performance within it besides Jonathan Majors-Kang, who I'll talk a little bit about in just a little bit, because I have conflicted feelings about how he is used in this movie, though I think Jonathan Majors himself is great. But the rest of the movie, I think, is just all fine. The performances are fine. Paul Rudd is great as always. Michelle Pfeiffer is wonderful. Evangeline Lilly is there, which probably, given Evangeline Lilly's very problematic views over the past few years, is probably for the best. But everyone's just kind of there, and they're putting in their best. They're doing the best with what they got, but everything is just the exact beats that you expect from an MCU film. Let me kind of talk specifics here. My big problem with the movie is that the movie starts and ends for Scott Lang's character in the exact same place. You know, I come out of the movie and I look at where was Scott Lang at the beginning of the movie and where was he at the end. And he's literally in the exact same place as a character as he was at the beginning of the movie as he is at the end of the movie. You know, there's this kind of arc throughout the film of Scott having to learn to let his daughter have more agency, get to trust her a little bit more. But that isn't really like fully drawn out or articulated. It's kind of briefly mentioned. We see little bits of it towards the beginning of the movie, and he comes to trust her. But I've seen other movies in recent times even that have been much more about like parents sort of learning to let go and have kids have agency within the world. I think probably the biggest one to my mind is God of War Ragnarok, which is a video game. But if you played that game is such a wonderful meditation on parenthood and letting a child be able to make their own mistakes while trying to guide them along their own path. And this movie kind of wants to touch at those same themes, but doesn't really do them with really doing anything interesting with them. I like the relationship Scott has with his daughter throughout the film. I thought their chemistry was off the charts, but really they're just there. We do get a little bit of backstory for Michelle Pfeiffer's character as we go to the quantum realm and see we learn her history throughout here. And while there are moments of getting to see sort of her badass history, you never really get a full exploration of what her life was like in this world. We get a little bit of what her life was like as she entered into it, where she met Jonathan Majors-Kang. We don't really get a sense of who she was or what she was really doing. And so as a result, that all just feels kind of flat and dull. Michelle Pfeiffer puts in a great performance, but I don't know, the world just feels too nebulous. And I think that is something overall with a movie that I'm kind of down on. You know, when I heard we were doing a movie set in the quantum realm and I saw some of the visuals in the trailer, one of the biggest worries for me, and I think it's kind of proven out, is that the world of the quantum realm just feels very nebulous to me. You know, when we go into like Thor's world with Asgard, or some of the things that we saw in Thor Ragnarok, what I at least appreciated about those worlds is that they felt kind of grounded, and I felt like I got a sense of the universe around them and the structure of the world around them a little bit more. Whereas in Quantumania, everything just feels so nebulous. It's just sort of generic, very trippy, like I wish I was higher when I watched this film visuals. Like it was very trippy looking, but nothing felt very concrete besides the generic. And as a result, like, we get, like, bars and sort of, like, big, you know, Kang's base and sort of his generic, like, cannon fodder, like, you know, soldiers and stuff. But nothing feels grounded in anything relevant. It just sort of all just trippy visuals. And as a result, I don't really care much about the quantum realm. We do have some characters that we meet that are like fighting against Kang the Conqueror, these sort of ousted people that are sort of, you know, trying to fight back for their land, which I think this is, in terms of the politics of Marvel movies, I think this is one of the better ones, because we have like sort of ousted people fighting against this, you know, guy who quite literally conquered their land and fighting back against them. And then we have socialist ants who are on our side, which are kind of a joke, but I'm like, at least we're like politically doing well here, Marvel, which has kind of been like status quo warriors in terms of a lot of the politics of a lot of the Marvel films. So that's there, but it's not really articulated in any deep way. So I'm just sort of like surface level. It's like, okay, cool. But yeah, we get sort of those people, and they have like kind of characters like Chidi's character. I don't remember the actor's name, so apologies to him. I just remember him as Chidi from The Good Place, because I love him in The Good Place. And we get like this alien sort of looking guy that like wants holes in him, which I thought was adorable. And those are fun. Those are cool little quirks, but I don't really care deeply about any of those characters enough to like care about their struggle or their strife. And the movie wants us to kind of invest in that. Like, I guess Scott doesn't really care about the little guy, but I guess he really does. He's just more worried about his daughter for a moment, but really he'll stand up for the little guy. It's just again, it's very flat and surface level, and I don't really care too much about any of the goings on within this world all that much. Oh, also Bill Murray's there. Yay. I hate to be so down on this movie because I wanted to be this film's most ardent defender, but there's not really anything special here. In fact, the one special thing that I actually really liked, because it was weird, and I loved the weird because it made me feel something and be kind of intrigued by it, was MODOK. I actually really loved MODOK in this film because the choice to make like Darren, the villain from the first movie, into MODOK and have him be like this like weird like chip on his shoulder dude who's just kind of pitiable, it was kind of fun. And every time like he was on screen and just being this pathetic little dude, I thought was kind of like just quirky and strange enough that I was like kind of like, yeah, I'm into this a little bit. And every time he like opened his mask and showed his giant head, I was like, oh, that's so weird. I was here for that because it made me feel something by how strange it was. I loved that choice, and I loved even in his spoilers, his death at the end of the movie. Even the movie's kind of like, yeah, fuck him. He's dying. We don't care. I thought that was just I thought that was a fun beat for the film generally. So I thought MODOK was great. All this brings me to the only part of the movie that I really had a lot of hope for and was both pleased and somewhat disappointed by, and that is Jonathan Majors Kang. Jonathan Major as Kang, I have been so pumped to see since his brief appearance in Loki Season 1. Like, the end of Loki Season 1, which, by the way, Loki was probably my favorite, it definitely was my favorite thing of Marvel Phase 4, and one of my favorite Marvel things generally. I love Loki. I love a lot of what it was doing. And it set up Kang at the end of that season so perfectly. I was like, oh, Jonathan Majors gonna bring it. He seems intense. He's brought the threat to the danger of these Kangs that are coming at the end of that season. So seeing him here was really great. And Jonathan Majors in the early parts of this film delivers on that promise of the first film. He manages to give this sense of empathy to Kang when he's sort of dealing with Michelle Pfeiffer and her backstory. Like, you really kind of, in a few scenes he gets, like, oh, I'm kind of invested in him as like a dude. Like, Jonathan Majors, with what little he gets, manages to make you feel like he's a person. And yet when Michelle Pfeiffer like learns his backstory, and you see like her like getting the backstory through the time machine thing that he has, and you just see him being like, okay, I'm gonna have to deal with this now. all right, we'll deal with it, and I'll try to be empathetic, but, you know, I'm gonna do what I need to do. I was like, Jonathan Majors just plays that so perfectly. He just brings this sense of weight and just like sense of like, yeah, I deserve this, but also a little bit of empathy. And so, yeah, there's this great grandiosity to him that I just really loved throughout the film. That unfortunately, I think is a little bit undercut by the end of the movie. Because he's kind of like plays like, I can beat you, Ant-Man. You just fight with ants. I've killed a bunch of Avengers before, and yet he's murdered by Ant-Man, or not murdered, but he's beaten by Ant-Man at the end of the film. And I would have been fine with that generally, but like there's no consequences for Ant-Man. Like at the end of the movie when Kang is beating him and like it seems like Scott is going to be stuck in the quantum realm, I'm like, okay, if Scott beats him but he has to stay in the quantum realm, or Evangeline Lilly comes and saves him and they both stay after stuck in the quantum realm, I'll be like, you know what? They beat Kang, and that kind of undercuts his grandiosity that he can beat by. And no, Ant-Man's great. I love Ant-Man. But the fact that, like, they're building this big MCU Phase 4 villain and he's beaten by Ant-Man feels like it undercuts him. But if there was a cost for Scott in beating Kang, I would have been like, okay, they can beat him, but there's a cost to some degree. But there isn't any. Kang and Evangeline, they beat Kang, and Scott and Evangeline Lilly get to go, go back home and be fine. And they're right back where they were at the start of the film, as if nothing mattered. And it kind of undoes the weight that Kang has and the good work that Jonathan Majors is doing, because Kang just feels like he was ineffectual. He gets beaten by Ant-Man here. And again, no shade at Ant-Man. I love Ant-Man, but if Ant-Man can beat him, why am I worried that the Avengers are going to have a problem with him coming into the next few films? And this is even made more of a problem because, Loki season 1 sort of ended was like, there's going to be all these different Kangs. They're all going to come after us. And I was like, oh, that's kind of scary, especially how scary you are, this version of Kang. And how scary even Kang the Conqueror version is. But then the after credit sequence, we just get a bunch of generic Kangs. Like we get and this feels I do not have the spoons right now to analyze this, but there's like a weird part of me is like, I don't know if that's okay. Where we have like Jonathan Majors in like an Egyptian mask and like all these other just different generic garb. And it's like, oh, these are the Kangs? Generic Kangs? Like there's nothing special about any of these different Kangs. They're just a bunch of generic Kangs that like, I'm just sort of like, cool, Jonathan Majors put on a costume and did a weird voice, And there's nothing that really makes me feel the weight or fear of them. Especially since you've just shown the Kang that's supposed to be the best of them, the exiled one, get beaten by Ant-Man. And it kind of undercuts and underplays him. The only thing that really made me excited was the after credit sequence, which was basically seemed like it was a scene from season 2 of Loki. I wouldn't be surprised if it's literally just a scene they took from season 2 of Loki, where we get to see like the Nikola Tesla kind of version of Kang, which I'm excited for that version. That seems really interesting. That seems intriguing to me. But I worry that like they are gonna just keep undercutting Kang and Jonathan Majors by keep introducing these new versions of Kang. I think they risk the problem that we saw with Doctor Who with Jenna Coleman's character, Clara. The problem with Clara's character was that she was kind of a mystery box character, and I wasn't able to invest in her first season that she was introduced. And the problem was we actually got to meet a couple different versions of Clara throughout the first season she was introduced with Matt Smith. I believe it was season 7? I forget. And the most interesting version of Clara got killed, and then we got introduced to a less interesting version of Clara that became the mystery box. And I worry that that's the problem here. We've met 2 versions of Kang that seemed interesting, kind of did away with them. Maybe we'll see the Conqueror version of Kang later on in the series. But we kind of did away with them pretty quickly, and now we kind of have more generic, less interesting ones. And it kind of like hesitates to make me want to invest in any of them as characters. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think I was impressed with Jonathan Majors. I trust Jonathan Majors to do the best he can with what he's given, but I'm a little bit nervous about the fact that Jonathan Majors might not be given anything interesting to do because they'll constantly undercut the Kangs that we get. Like, Jonathan Majors is a great presence. I think Kang can be a great villain, but I worry if he's going to be a little bit too generic going forward as the lead, given the setup that we have for him going forward. So, Jonathan Majors is probably the most interesting thing to talk about here, and that's not a shade at any of the actors or people involved in this, but this movie just feels like it was fluff, like it was running in place. You know, the movie characters begin and end in relatively the same place emotionally and physically. There's no consequences, really. And the big thing that you're doing with this movie, which was introducing Kang, feels like it's undercut a little bit. It feels like it's kind of saying the same thing that Loki Season 1 already did in a less intriguing way, in a repetitious way. So that's my thought on Ant-Man Quantumania. I thought it was fine. I don't hate the movie. I'm kind of down on it. I'm kind of negative on it. I don't hate it, but it just feels like 2 hours that I spent at the movies rather than anything that I'm like going to be super pumped or excited about, you know? And I'm not angry about it, but neither am I super excited. And sometimes that's even worse. I'd rather come out of a movie feeling angry about it because at least I had an emotional reaction, whereas this one I'm just sort of like, yeah, that was a movie that existed. Most certainly. Anyways, that is my thought on Ant-Man Quantumania. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. What did you think about this? Do you disagree with me? Did you love it? I would love to hear that. I hope people did have a huge emotional reaction to it. But those are my feelings. And with that, I will say, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.